2014, Cartoon Network released what seemed like an innocent show about a gap-toothed kid named Clarence and his suburban adventures. Colorful, wholesome, safe. But if you look closer at the backgrounds, the character behaviors, and the disturbing patterns hidden throughout 3 seasons, you'll find something far darker. A town called Aberdale that might not be what it seems. Children exhibiting trauma responses disguised as quirky personalities. And a timeline that doesn't add up when you actually pay attention to what the show is telling you. What if Clarence isn't a comedy about childhood? What if it's a documentary about something that already happened? Something the creators knew, but could only hint at? Today, we're diving into the disturbing, hidden reality of Clarence, and I promise you'll never see this show the same way again. *** Chapter 1. The Town That Shouldn't Exist, 135***. Let's start with Aberdale itself. On the surface, it's a typical American town. But here's what doesn't make sense. Throughout the series, we never see Clarence's father. Not once. We see his mother Mary with her boyfriend Chad. But Clarence's biological father is completely absent from the narrative. No explanation, no mention. He's simply erased. Now, that alone isn't unusual for a cartoon. But here's where it gets strange. In Season 2, Episode 14, titled Clarence's Millions, there's a brief scene where Clarence finds an old photograph in his mother's closet. The animators drew a full family photo, then deliberately blurred out one figure. Fans on Reddit isolated the frames and enhanced the image. The blurred figure appears to be wearing what looks like a prison jumpsuit. The photograph is dated 2009, 5 years before the show aired. But it gets darker. In that same episode, if you listen carefully to the background music when Clarence holds the photo, the cheerful tune distorts for exactly 3 seconds into what sounds like a slowed-down voice saying, "He's still watching." Audio engineers have isolated this sound, and it's definitely there, deliberately placed in the mix. Now look at Mary, Clarence's mother. She's portrayed as carefree, almost irresponsibly relaxed. But watch her eyes in scenes where Clarence does something reckless. She doesn't react like a parent, she freezes. In episode 23 of Season 1, Dinner Party, Clarence nearly falls from a balcony, and instead of rushing to grab him, Mary completely dissociates for 4 full seconds of animation. Her expression goes blank. That's not lazy parenting, that's a trauma response. ***, Chapter 2. Sumo, the boy who stopped talking, 5 to 8:30, ***. Then there's Sumo, Clarence's best friend, the wild child who lives in a trailer park and seems to have zero supervision. The show plays him for laughs, but every single detail about Sumo screams neglect. Sumo's real name is never given. Sumo is just a nickname. In Season 1, we briefly meet his father in episode 19, Dreamboat. He's shown drinking from a paper bag and doesn't speak a single word to Sumo the entire episode. Not one word. He communicates only through grunts and dismissive hand gestures. This isn't played for comedy. The scene is uncomfortable. The animation lingers on Sumo's face, waiting for acknowledgement that never comes. But here's the detail that made my skin crawl. In Season 3, Episode 2, Straight Illin, Sumo gets sick and hallucinates. During his fever dream, we see a younger version of Sumo, maybe 4 or 5 years old, standing in a dark room calling for his mother. The animation style shifts. It becomes realistic, rotoscoped, like the animators traced over real footage. The younger Sumo calls out, "Mama?" 7 times. No one answers. Then the dream cuts abruptly back to the regular animation style. Why would the animators spend the time and budget to rotoscope a 15-second hallucination sequence unless they were trying to show us something real? Something that actually happened to this character? And notice Sumo never mentions his mother. Not in 3 seasons. When other kids talk about their moms, Sumo goes silent or changes the subject. In episode 31, Neighborhood Grill, when a character asks where Sumo's mom is, he says, "She went away when I was little." and the show immediately cuts to another scene. No follow-up, no explanation. Just a child casually mentioning abandonment. Asterisk, asterisk, chapter 3, Jeff, the friend who knows too much, 8:30:12, asterisk, asterisk. Now we need to talk about Jeff, the neurotic, anxious, rule-following kid who's terrified of everything. The surface reading is that he's just an overprotected child. But watch his anxiety. It's not about germs or strangers. It's specifically about unpredictability, about things going wrong, about disaster. In Season 1, Episode 16, Jeff's Secret, we learn that Jeff. In 2014, Cartoon Network released what seemed like an innocent show about a gap-toothed kid named Clarence and his suburban adventures. Colorful, wholesome, safe. But if you look closer at the backgrounds, the character behaviors, and the disturbing patterns hidden throughout 3 seasons, you'll find something far darker. A town called Aberdale that might not be what it seems. Children exhibiting trauma responses disguised as quirky personalities. And a timeline that doesn't add up when you actually pay attention to what the show is telling you. What if Clarence isn't a comedy about childhood? What if it's a documentary about something that already happened? Something the creators knew, but could only hint at. Today, we're diving into the disturbing, hidden reality of Clarence, and I promise you'll never see this show the same way again. Let's start with Aberdale itself. On the surface, it's a typical American town. But here's what doesn't make sense. Throughout the series, we never see Clarence's father. Not once. We see his mother Mary with her boyfriend Chad, but Clarence's biological father is completely absent from the narrative. No explanation, no mention. He's simply erased. Now, that alone isn't unusual for a cartoon. But here's where it gets strange. In Season 2, Episode 14, titled Clarence's Millions, there's a brief scene where Clarence finds an old photograph in his mother's closet. The animators drew a full family photo, then deliberately blurred out one figure. Fans on Reddit isolated the frames and enhanced the image. The blurred figure appears to be wearing what looks like a prison jumpsuit. The photograph is dated 2009, 5 years before the show aired. But it gets darker. In that same episode, if you listen carefully to the background music when Clarence holds the photo, the cheerful tune distorts for exactly 3 seconds into what sounds like a slowed-down voice saying, "He's still watching." Audio engineers have isolated this sound, and it's definitely there, deliberately placed in the mix. Now look at Mary, Clarence's mother. She's portrayed as carefree, almost irresponsibly relaxed, but watch her eyes in scenes where Clarence does something reckless. She doesn't react like a parent, she freezes. In episode 23 of Season 1, Dinner Party, Clarence nearly falls from a balcony, and instead of rushing to grab him, Mary completely dissociates for 4 full seconds of animation. Her expression goes blank. That's not lazy parenting. That's a trauma response. And there's more about Mary that doesn't add up. In Season 1, Episode 11, Average Jeff, we see inside Mary's bedroom for the first time. On her nightstand, there's a pill bottle. The label is deliberately drawn blurry, but if you enhance the image, you can make out partial letters that spell what looks like claws, which could be clozapine, an antipsychotic medication. Why would the animators include this detail? Why make it just blurry enough that you have to look for it? In Season 2, Episode 27, Sticky Clarence, Mary has a breakdown over Clarence getting sticky substances all over the house. But it's not a normal parental frustration. She starts hyperventilating. Her hands shake, and she locks herself in the bathroom for what Clarence mentions is over an hour. When she comes out, she's smiling again, but her eyes are red. Chad tries to ask if she's okay, and she responds, "I'm fine. I just needed to remember where I was for a second." Remember where she was? What does that mean? Then there's Sumo, Clarence's best friend, the wild child who lives in a trailer park and seems to have zero supervision. The show plays him for laughs, but every single detail about Sumo screams neglect. Sumo's real name is never given. Sumo is just a nickname. In Season 1, we briefly meet his father in Episode 19, Dreamboat. He's shown drinking from a paper bag and doesn't speak a single word to Sumo the entire episode. Not one word. He communicates only through grunts and dismissive hand gestures. This isn't played for comedy. The scene is uncomfortable. The animation lingers on Sumo's face, waiting for acknowledgement that never comes. But here's the detail that made my skin crawl. In Season 3, Episode 2, Straight Illin, Sumo gets sick and hallucinates. During his fever dream, we see a younger version of Sumo, maybe 4 or 5 years old, standing in a dark room calling for his mother. The animation style shifts. It becomes realistic, rotoscoped, like the animators traced over real footage. The younger Sumo calls out, "Mama?" 7 times. No one answers. Then the dream cuts abruptly back to the regular animation style. Why would the animators spend the time and budget to rotoscope a 15-second hallucination sequence unless they were trying to show us something real, something that actually happened to this character? And notice Sumo never mentions his mother. Not in 3 seasons. When other kids talk about their moms, Sumo goes silent or changes the subject. In Episode 31, Neighborhood Grill, when a character asks where Sumo's mom is, he says, "She went away when I was little," and the show immediately cuts to another scene. No follow-up, no explanation, just a child casually mentioning abandonment. But there's another layer to Sumo that's even more disturbing. In Season 2, Episode 18, Lil Buddy, Sumo finds a baby bird and becomes obsessively protective of it. He builds it an elaborate nest, feeds it constantly, talks to it for hours. When the bird eventually flies away, Sumo has a complete meltdown. He destroys the nest, screams that everyone leaves, and then goes completely silent for the rest of the episode. Not just quiet, silent. He doesn't speak a single word for 12 minutes of runtime. This isn't about a bird. This is a child who's been abandoned so many times that he can't handle even an animal leaving him. And in Season 3, Episode 12, Somewhere Out There, there's a scene where Sumo is alone in his trailer. The camera pans across the living room, and we see dozens of drawings taped to the walls. Crude crayon drawings of a woman with long hair holding a small boy's hand. Every single drawing is the same image, repeated over and over. Sumo has drawn his mother holding his hand dozens, maybe hundreds of times, like he's trying to remember what it felt like, or create a memory that never existed. Now we need to talk about Jeff, the neurotic, anxious, rule-following kid who's terrified of everything. The surface reading is that he's just an overprotected child. But watch his anxiety. It's not about germs or strangers. It's specifically about unpredictability, about things going wrong, about disaster. In Season 1, Episode 16, Jeff's Secret, we learn that Jeff lies to his parents constantly about where he is and what he's doing. For a kid who seems to worship rules, that's contradictory, unless he's not afraid of breaking rules. He's afraid of what happens when his parents know the truth. We meet Jeff's parents briefly, and they're portrayed as loving but overbearing. Except in one scene in Season 2, Episode 9, Somewhere Out There, Jeff comes home late, and his father is sitting in complete darkness. Not reading, not watching TV, just sitting in a dark room waiting. When Jeff enters, his father doesn't yell. He says quietly, "We were worried," but his face shows no emotion. Jeff apologizes profusely, over-explaining, exhibiting classic fear-based people-pleasing behavior. That's not normal parental concern. That's control through intimidation. And here's what really disturbs me. Jeff keeps a journal. We see it in multiple episodes. In Season 3, Episode 18, Capture the Flag, there's a scene where Jeff's journal falls open, and for exactly 2 frames, we see a page. Fans froze the frames. The visible text reads, "If I write it down, maybe I can remember it differently. Maybe I can make it like it didn't happen that way. That's dissociation. That's a child trying to rewrite his own memories to cope with something. But Jeff's anxiety manifests in very specific ways that reveal even more. In Season 1, Episode 29, Lunch Lady, Jeff has a panic attack in the cafeteria. But it's not triggered by the food or the crowd. It's triggered by a lunch lady who touches his shoulder unexpectedly. Jeff flinches so hard he knocks over his tray, then hyperventilates. When Clarence asks what's wrong, Jeff says, "I don't like it when people touch me without asking first." His voice breaks when he says it. That's not about being germophobic. That's about boundaries being violated. In Season 2, Episode 21, The Big PT Pizza Problem, Jeff refuses to go into a restaurant's back room to retrieve something. When Clarence asks why, Jeff just says, "I don't go into rooms I can't see inside first." He's trembling as he says it. Clarence laughs it off, but the camera holds on Jeff's face for 3 full seconds. He's not being quirky. He's genuinely terrified. And then there's the most revealing moment. In Season 3, Episode 15, Jeff wins. Jeff actually wins a competition at school for the first time. Everyone celebrates him. But that night, we see Jeff in his room, staring at his trophy, and he's crying. Not happy tears, he's sobbing. When his mother comes in to congratulate him again, Jeff asks, "Do you love me more when I win things?" His mother laughs it off as a silly question. But Jeff doesn't laugh. He asks again, "Do you?" That's a child who's learned that love is conditional, that affection has to be earned through achievement. Here's where everything falls apart. If you map out the timeline of Clarence based on clues dropped throughout the series, the show is set in 2014 when it aired. But multiple episodes reference events that happened when the characters were younger, and when you do the math, something is very wrong. In Season 2, Episode 22, Belson's Sleepover, Belson mentions that his parents got divorced 5 years ago. Belson is 9 years old in the show. That means his parents divorced when he was 4, which would be 2009. But in a flashback sequence in Season 1, Episode 28, Breen's Mega Market, we see a young Belson with both parents together at the store's grand opening. The banner in the background reads, "Grand Opening 2011. So which is it? Did his parents divorce in 2009, or were they still together in 2011? Unless the timelines don't match because the characters are remembering things wrong, or they've been told to remember things a certain way. And then there's the most disturbing detail. In Season 3, Episode 7, Clarence gets a girlfriend. There's a scene at the school library where Clarence looks at a yearbook. The yearbook is from Aberdale Elementary, dated 2003. Clarence would have been -2 years old. But when he flips through it, we see photographs of children. And in the background of one photo, there's a kid who looks exactly like Clarence. Same gap tooth, same hair, same face. The show never addresses this. Clarence closes the yearbook and walks away. But it gets stranger. In Season 1, Episode 4, Puddle Eyes, there's a scene where Clarence and his friends are at City Hall looking at old town records for a school project. On the wall, there's a plaque commemorating the Aberdale Elementary incident of 2003. The plaque is shown for maybe 2 seconds, and the text is too small to read fully. But fans have enhanced the image. The visible portion reads, "In memory of the children who," and then it's cut off by the frame. In memory of children who what? The show never explains. Clarence and his friends don't even notice the plaque. They walk right past it. In Season 2, Episode 16, Tuckered Boys, there's a scene where Jeff is researching Aberdale's history online. We see his computer screen briefly, and he's on a true crime forum. The thread title visible on screen reads, "Aberdale Elementary 2003, What Really Happened?" Jeff closes the browser immediately, and when Clarence asks what he was looking at, Jeff says, "Nothing." Just a school project. Why is Jeff researching an incident from 2003? Why does he lie about it? And here's something even more unsettling. If you go through the series and note every time a specific date or year is mentioned, you'll find that 2003 comes up 7 times across all 3 seasons. Always in background details. Always briefly. A newspaper clipping on a wall. A date on a document. A year mentioned in passing dialogue. The show wants you to notice 2003, but it never tells you why. Miss Baker is Clarence's teacher, and she's presented as patient and kind. But pay attention to her classroom. In 3 full seasons across multiple episodes showing the passage of time, holidays, seasons changing, the classroom looks identical. Same posters, same decorations, same seating arrangement. In Season 2, Episode 15, Valentine. It's February. The classroom has Valentine's decorations. Normal. But in Season 1, Episode 7, Puddle Eyes, which takes place in September based on dialogue about the new school year, there are Valentine's decorations visible in the background. Same decorations, same placement. It's as if the classroom exists in a loop, a static environment that doesn't progress. And Miss Baker herself never ages. Obviously, it's a cartoon, but the show makes a point of showing other adults aging. In Season 3, we see Mary get a gray hair and comment on it. We see Principal Reese mention his upcoming retirement, but Miss Baker remains exactly the same. In Season 3, Episode 20, The Substitute, Miss Baker is absent and a substitute teacher arrives. The substitute seems disturbed by the classroom. She keeps looking around confused and at one point says to herself, "This room feels like a photograph. What does that mean?" The kids don't react. They don't hear her, but the animators made sure we did. But there's more about Miss Baker that doesn't add up. In Season 1, Episode 21, Honk, there's a parent-teacher conference scene. Miss Baker is talking to parents, and on her desk, there's a framed photograph facing away from the camera. One of the parents accidentally knocks it over, and for exactly 1 frame, we see the photo. It's Miss Baker, looking exactly the same as she does in the show, standing in front of Aberdale Elementary. The photo quality suggests it's old, maybe from the 1990s or early 2000s. But she looks identical. Same age, same hairstyle, same everything. In Season 2, Episode 25, Clarence's stormy sleepover, there's a flashback to Miss Baker's first day teaching. The flashback is supposedly set 15 years ago based on dialogue. But in the flashback, Miss Baker looks exactly the same. Not younger, not different. Exactly the same. And then there's what Miss Baker says sometimes that doesn't quite make sense. In Season 3, Episode 9, Suspended, when Clarence is being disciplined, Miss Baker tells him, "We all make mistakes, Clarence. Some of us get to start over. Some of us don't. What does that mean?" Clarence is 9 years old. Why is she talking about starting over like it's some profound life lesson? In Season 2, Episode 30, Anywhere, Miss Baker is reading a story to the class about a boy who could travel anywhere in his imagination. At the end of the story, she closes the book and says softly, almost to herself, "Sometimes imagination is safer than memory." The kids don't react, but the camera holds on her face. She looks sad, distant. We need to talk about the other kids in Clarence's class, because they're not just background characters. They each have their own disturbing patterns. Belson, the rich bully, is presented as a spoiled brat, but watch how he interacts with his possessions. He's not bratty about toys because he's spoiled. He's obsessive because they're the only consistent thing in his life. In Season 1, Episode 25, Belson gets a girlfriend. Belson has a complete breakdown when one of his toys is moved from its usual spot. He screams, "Everything has to stay where it's supposed to be. Everything!" That's not about toys. That's about control. About needing something, anything, to be predictable in his life. And in Season 2, Episode 22, Belson's sleepover. When kids come to his house, Belson gives them a tour. His house is massive, but completely sterile. No family photos on the walls. No personal touches. Just expensive furniture and empty rooms. When Clarence comments that the house is fancy but lonely, Belson's face falls for just a moment before he recovers and insults Clarence. Then there's Brian, the cashier's kid who seems innocent and sweet. But Brian never talks about anything outside of the present moment, never mentions memories, never talks about the past. In Season 1, Episode 28, when Clarence asks Breen about when he was little, Breen just says, "I don't really remember being little," and changes the subject. He's 9 years old. How do you not remember being little? In Season 3, Episode 6, RC Car, Breen finds an old remote control car in his garage. When his mother sees it, she quickly takes it away and says, "That's not yours, honey." But Breen says, "It has my name on it." His mother insists it's not his and throws it away. Later, we see Breen trying to dig through the trash to get it back, whispering to himself, "I know it was mine. I know it was." What if Breen had a life before? What if he's been told to forget it? And then there's Chelsea, the girl who's obsessed with tea parties and pretend play. But her pretend games are disturbing when you pay attention. In Season 2, Episode 13, Rough Riders Elementary, Chelsea is playing with dolls, and we hear what she's making them say. One doll says, "Where did all the other children go?" And another responds, "We don't talk about that. We have to be good now." Chelsea is making her dolls act out forgetting something, forcing herself to be good to avoid remembering. In Season 3, Episode 17, Merry Moochmas, during a Christmas play, Chelsea forgets her lines. She stands on stage frozen, and then she starts crying and says, "I don't want to be in the play. I don't want everyone looking at me." Her mother rushes to comfort her, but Chelsea keeps saying, "I don't want them to see me. What if they recognize me?" Recognize her from what? Throughout the series, Clarence and his friends visit various locations in Aberdale, but some of these places have disturbing details that suggest they're not what they seem. Rough Riders Chicken is the fast food restaurant the kids frequent. It's portrayed as a cheerful, kid-friendly place, but in Season 1, Episode 13, Dinner Party, there's a scene in the restaurant's bathroom. On the wall, someone has scratched into the paint. They're not telling you the truth about 03. It's visible for maybe 1 second as Clarence walks past. The show never addresses it. In Season 2, Episode 24, Goose Chase, Clarence and his friends break into Rough Riders after hours for a scavenger hunt. In the manager's office, there's a filing cabinet. When it briefly opens, we see files labeled with years: 2001, 2002, 2004, 2005. There's no file for 2003. There's just an empty space where 2003 should be. The public pool is another location that appears frequently. But in Season 3, Episode 11, Pool's Out, the pool is being drained for maintenance. As the water level drops, we see something at the bottom. It's hard to make out, but it looks like carved initials and dates in the concrete. Dozens of them. The camera doesn't focus on them, but if you pause and enhance, you can see multiple sets of initials followed by 2003. And then there's Aberdale Elementary itself. The school is old, clearly built decades ago. But in Season 2, Episode 8, Public Radio, there's a segment about the school's history. The radio host mentions that the current building was built in 2004. The previous building was torn down in late 2003 after structural issues made it unsafe. Structural issues? Or was something else wrong with that building? Something they needed to erase? In Season 3, Episode 14, Missing Teeth, Clarence loses a tooth, and the school nurse takes him to the nurse's office. On the wall, there's a timeline of the school's history. It shows photos from the 1950s, 60 seconds, 70 seconds, 80 seconds, 90 seconds, and then it jumps from 2002 to 2004. There's no photo from 2003, just a gap in the timeline. Throughout the series, multiple characters have dreams or moments where reality seems to glitch. These aren't played for laughs, they're genuinely unsettling. In Season 1, Episode 20, Clarence's Millions, Clarence has a dream where he's walking through Aberdale, but everything is slightly wrong. The colors are muted. The people have no faces. He walks into his classroom and all the desks are empty, except one. In that desk sits a boy who looks like Clarence but isn't quite right. The boy turns to Clarence and says, "Do you remember what happened to us?" Then Clarence wakes up screaming. In Season 2, Episode 5, Straight Illin, multiple characters get sick with the same illness. They all have fever dreams, and the dreams are shown one after another. Sumo dreams of calling for his mother. Jeff dreams of being locked in a small room. Clarence dreams of standing in a classroom while someone takes attendance, calling out names of children we've never seen in the show. The dreams are connected. They're all remembering something. And then there are the glitches. Moments where the animation itself seems to break down. In Season 3, Episode 4, Clarence for President, there's a scene where Clarence is giving a speech. For exactly 5 frames, his face distorts. His smile becomes too wide. His eyes go black. Then it snaps back to normal. It happens so fast you'd miss it if you weren't looking. In Season 2, Episode 19, Lost Playground, there's a moment where the background music cuts out completely. Total silence for 3 seconds, while Clarence stares at an abandoned playground. In that silence, if you turn the volume up all the way, you can hear faint voices, children's voices, whispering. The audio team deliberately placed this in the mix. Skylar Page created Clarence and served as showrunner for the first season. In 2014, he was fired from Cartoon Network following allegations of inappropriate behavior. The official statement was brief, and Page never publicly discussed the show's deeper themes before or after his departure. The new showrunner, Stephen P. Neary, took over for Seasons 2 and 3. In a 2016 interview with Animation Magazine, when asked about the show's darker undertones that fans were noticing, Neary said something strange. He said, "Every children's show has layers. We wanted Clarence to feel real, and real life has shadows. We wanted to honor that without making it explicit." Honor what? What shadows? In that same interview, Neary was asked about the recurring references to 2003. He paused for a long time, according to the interviewer, and then said, "I think there are some things the original vision of the show wanted to explore that we decided to leave as breadcrumbs rather than answers. Sometimes the questions are more important than the explanations. But what question is the show asking?" The writing staff included Spencer Rothbell, who in a 2017 podcast mentioned that they had a series Bible that included detailed backstories for every character. "Backstories that would probably disturb people if we ever made them explicit," he said, laughing nervously. When the host asked him to elaborate, Rothbell said, "Let's just say there were reasons Clarence is the way he is, and reasons Aberdale is the way it is, and we decided it was better to suggest than to show." The show's composer, Nick Keller, posted on Twitter in 2018 shortly after the series ended, "Scoring Clarence was one of the most emotionally challenging projects I've worked on. There was a sadness underneath all that joy that we tried to capture musically, like something lost trying to be remembered." He deleted the tweet 2 hours later. The series ended on the 24th of June 2018 with the episode Capture the Flag. It wasn't marketed as a series finale. There was no announcement that the show was ending. It just stopped. Capture the Flag seems like a normal episode on the surface. Clarence and his friends play an elaborate game of Capture the Flag that takes over the entire town. Everyone participates. It's fun and chaotic and silly. But in the final scene after the game ends, there's a moment that's haunted me since I first saw it. Clarence is sitting alone on a hill, overlooking Aberdale as the sun sets. The music shifts to a melancholic piano melody. Clarence stares at the town, and he says quietly to himself, "I wish I could stay here forever." Not, "I wish this day could last forever," or "I wish summer never ended." He says, "I wish I could stay here forever." Like he knows he's not really there. Like he knows Aberdale isn't real. Like he knows he's going to have to leave this safe, imaginary place and go back to whatever reality he's been hiding from. Then the camera slowly zooms out. We see Clarence on the hill. We see Aberdale spread out below him. And as the camera continues to pull back, the colors start to desaturate. The bright, cheerful colors of the show slowly drain away until the image is nearly black and white. The final shot of the entire series is Clarence, small and alone, sitting in an increasingly colorless world. Then it cuts to black. The end. No credits sequence with jokes or bloopers like other episodes, just black. And in that black screen, before the actual credits roll, there's audio. It's extremely faint. You have to turn your volume all the way up to hear it. It sounds like a child's voice whispering, "I remember now." Then the credits roll normally, like nothing happened. So what does all of this mean? Here's the theory that's been circulating in deep analysis forums, and honestly, once you see it, you can't unsee it. Clarence isn't a show about a kid's everyday life. It's a show about a child processing trauma through dissociation and fantasy. Aberdale isn't a real town. It's a construct. A safe version of reality that Clarence has created in his mind to cope with something that happened. Something that happened in 2003. The missing father. The mother's dissociation. Sumo's abandonment. Jeff's anxiety. And need to rewrite his memories. The timeline inconsistencies. The classroom that never changes. The gaps in Aberdale's history. The children who all seem to be running from their own pasts. These aren't plot holes. They're symptoms. The show is taking place in Clarence's mind as he tries to make sense of a reality too painful to face directly. That's why nothing fully makes sense. Why adults behave strangely. Why time doesn't work right. Why that kid in the 2003 yearbook looks like Clarence. Because maybe something happened in 2003. Something involving children at Aberdale Elementary. Something traumatic enough that a child's mind would construct an entire false reality to cope with it. Maybe Clarence, or whatever his real name is, was there. Maybe Sumo was there. Maybe Jeff was there. Maybe all these children were there, and they've all been trying to remember it differently ever since. The show is their collective attempt to create a world where that event never happened. Where childhood is safe. Where teachers are kind. Where the worst thing that happens is losing a toy or failing a test. But the truth keeps bleeding through. In the backgrounds, in the dreams, in the glitches, in the year that keeps appearing, 2003. And maybe that's why the show had to end. Because Clarence was starting to remember. The colors were fading. The illusion was breaking down. And whoever Clarence really is, wherever he really is, was about to wake up and face what actually happened. The creators of Clarence have never commented on any of these theories. The show ended in 2018 after 3 seasons. No finale, no explanation, just over. But once you notice these patterns, you can't watch the show the same way. Every smile feels forced. Every joke feels like it's covering something. And that gap-toothed kid just trying to have fun, maybe he's trying to forget. Maybe Aberdale is a beautiful lie, a colorful prison built to keep children safe from a truth too terrible to remember. What do you think really happened in Aberdale in 2003? What are these children running from? And why did the show end the way it did, with Clarence alone on a hill, watching his world lose its color? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you want more disturbing cartoon theories that will change how you see your childhood favorites, subscribe because we're just getting started. Until next time, stay curious. And maybe, just maybe, remember to question the worlds we build, to keep ourselves safe from the truth.